Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for the very first top 10 of the year 2024 here on the channel. So naturally we're going to start 2024 off in the right way, which is going to be the 7th day of Skylands, where we're going to be counting down not only the top 10 best variants, but also the top 10 worst Skylanders variants, because trust me, in the entirety of the history of the Skylanders franchise, there have been some exceptional variants, but there have also been plenty of stinkers on the other end of the spectrum. This list is based on how good the colour palette is, how much it helps the figurine to stand out as a variant, how much it changes from the original character to make it a worthwhile variant or not. And so naturally, those factors, whether they are good or bad for either the best or worst list, that is what the list is based upon. Any in-game variant throughout the entirety of the franchise is considered for this list, and the same variant series can appear twice, even on the same list. So if there's two variants from the same series bad enough to both be on the worst list, then they will both be there.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
But speaking of the worst list, we're going to start with that so that then the video can end on a much more positive note. So without further ado, let's check out the top 10 worst Skylanders variants. For number 10 on the worst list, I have Dark Wolfgang. Now before you race to smash that dislike button, let me explain myself. This is still a great variant, but I needed something for this list, and unfortunately for Dark Wolfgang, he just so happens to be one of the worst Dark variants. That's because he doesn't really live up to the name Dark, as he's mainly silver. Speaking of silver, it's not really that aesthetically pleasing as fur. Since fur is most of Wolfgang's figurine, it means the main bulk of the figurine is silver with very little black to contrast it. This is still a great variant, but I just don't think this particular colour palette meshes with this particular character design very well. There are dozens of better choices for senseis to turn into a dark variant, so choosing Wolfgang was a mistake in my opinion. For number 9, I have Punch Pop Fizz, and once again I ask you to please gently lower your torches and pitchforks so I can explain myself. Punch Pop Fizz is simply just a boring variant. It looks fine and differentiates itself perfectly from the original Pop Fizz, making it a worthwhile variant, but that doesn't change the fact that most of the figurine is red with no colour contrast to it whatsoever. All they did to design this variant was take all the colours that were blue and change them into red. It's not particularly exciting or a huge effort on behalf of the developers. I would still rather have this variant over no variant at all, but later versions of Pop Fizz showed us how to do variants for this character properly, as turning his beast pink is really fitting for that aspect of the design, and it opens up the opportunity for sharper colour contrasts. And the same can be said for Birthday Bash Big Bubble Pop Fizz, where the colour scheme is much more memorable as it stands out for its uniqueness and eye-pleasing colour contrasts. As it stands, Punch Pop Fizz is simply just bland compared to most other variants throughout the franchise, but he's far from bad. Much like Dark Wolfgang, I just needed some decent variants to take up this portion of the list, and unfortunately for Punch Pop Fizz, he fills that purpose far too perfectly. Number 8, I have Molten Hot Dog, whose colour scheme is worse than the original because the lighter shade of orange isn't as contrasting or visually pleasing as the red on the original figurine. In fact, the lava flow and orange rocks blend together so the entire figurine just looks like one entire blocky colour with no colours to contrast itself with. This certainly is a unique variant as there is no other colour scheme like it, but that makes it easy to see why they didn't bother returning to this colour scheme, because Molten Hot Dog really isn't bad in its own right, but I'd just much rather stick with the original as that has more of an interesting colour palette to it than what this variant has to offer. For number 7, I have a character with the same problem as Dark Wolfgang. It's the wrong character meshed with the wrong colour scheme. Legendary Zulu simply doesn't work for me. I don't like how he has black fur and then all the golden parts of the figurine are next to one another. Because of this, the cape, the armour and the shoulder pads all just look like one huge piece, and there's no sort of contrast and colours to distinguish each aspect of the design. This is why the original has sharp and contrasting colours to tell each element of the design apart. This is also why the original colours work so much better for this particular design. Legendary Zulu is incredibly ugly. I'm glad to have a second version of this incredibly underrated character, but it didn't need to come in the form of this colour palette. For number 6, I have a variant which completely disregards the point of a character's design in the first place. Splat possesses a paint-based moveset. As such, her original version is very visually distinctive as it features numerous colours that all contrast each other very nicely to mimic that of a painting. The Power Blue version, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. This is the most dull shade of blue and white imaginable, as nothing visually pops out and it makes Splat seem boring, which isn't fair for such a colourful and vibrant character who's actually full of energy, but nothing about this figurine conveys any of that. To add salt to the wound, this variant series was used to raise money for charity, but the charity they chose, known as Autism Speaks, isn't the best choice. At least with the other Power Blue variants, the colours themselves work nicely for Trigger Happy's design, and the colour scheme looks much nicer on the vehicles, but Splat's Power Blue variant completely misses the mark, and as such is deserving of number 6 on this list. Number 5, I have Mistletoe Diveclops. The original has a dull blue and white colour scheme, but it's a spear with mostly the same colour and very little other colours to contrast it. Naturally, this design doesn't lend itself well to a variant either. The whites on the figurine have remained exactly the same, whilst the blue has changed to a shade of red which is dull and lifeless. With this being a Christmas variant, it's come after 2 phenomenal Christmas variants that had sharp and mesmerising colour contrasts as well as a fine attention to detail. It highlights the lack of details on this figurine by comparison. Once again, why favour one of the more boring original characters for a colour scheme with such great potential? They even wasted the base gimmick of Superchargers, where the physical bases of the Skylanders have different colours based on the version you're playing with, and here the base has this really ugly shade of green which doesn't complement any of the other colours whatsoever, so you have a dull figurine with a base that stands out for all the wrong reasons. For number 4, I have Dark Ninja Stealth Elf, which I know doesn't seem so bad at first sight, especially given the eyesores we've seen so far in this video, but when I put the other Ninja Stealth Elf by its side, you'll soon see where the problem lies. There is nothing to tell these figurines apart. I could very easily pick up the variant by accident when intending to play as a regular version and vice versa. Ninja Stealth Elf's entire outfit is this black ninja suit, so naturally the black returns the exact same when changing over to the dark variant colour scheme. The only things the dark figurine changes are the weapons and the skin tone of the Stealth Elf. Even the hair remains the same. Why even bother designing a variant if only 1% of the figurine will have something to show for it? This is such a waste of a dark variant slot which could have been given to literally any other character, and that is what upsets me about Dark Ninja Stealth Elf enough to justify her spot as the 4th worst variant in the entire franchise. For number 3, I have Egg-Sighted Thrillipede, which has to be one of the most disappointing variant names of all time, because this Thrillipede doesn't look exciting at all. He just looks boring. Much like Splat, taking away all the sharp colour contrast makes this design seem bleak and lifeless. 90% of the figurine is the most boring colour ever conceived. White. Plain old white. They didn't change the colour for the shoulder pads to contrast this. The only ounce of colour on this entire figurine is the Easter egg grenades, and because that's a colourful and creative twist on the character, it's the only thing making this variant worthwhile. It's such a shame that there's a great idea implemented into such an awful variant. That's what makes it all the more disappointing to me. Everything else about this figurine is so incredibly boring and lacking any sort of distinctive visual contrast, unlike prior Easter variants who really stood out for their bright and contrasting colours. I don't know who was in charge of designing variants for the Superchargers, but they seem to have failed their job miserably. They really dropped the ball with most of these Supercharger variants. But luckily, none of the Supercharger variants come close to the abysmal variant known as Steel-Plated Smash Hit. Silver and green are 2 colours not designed to blend with one another, especially when you have thousands of shades of green. Literally, of all of the colours on the entirety of the spectrum, green is the colour which has the most shades visible to the human eye, and for some reason, you choose to pick the very worst one. This colour scheme makes me want to puke, it's so horrendous, but still, this design doesn't offend my eyes nearly as much as steel-plated Hoodsicle. That's right, after the abomination known as steel-plated smash hit, some idiot thought it was a great idea to continue with this variant line as they introduced steel-plated Hoodsicle 1 year later, and for this specific character design, the colour scheme somehow looks even worse. I'm impressed that they managed to make this even worse in all honesty, as it seemed there was no way they could drop lower in steel-plated smash hit, but I was wrong. They were indeed able to stoop lower. What's even more offensive is that besides the dark sea shadow, this is the only look at a dark variant we ever received, and to have this monstrosity is incredibly disappointing to me because I'm sure there could have been some great dark elemental variants, but instead we were left with this, where a developer puked all over a Hoodsicle figurine and they thought to turn it into an actual toy. I know talking about puke is gross, but so is steel-plated colour schemes. I'm going to move on to the best list before I cause some health problems looking at this variant anymore, so let's get this to the place where it belongs, into the rubbish bin. But now without further ado, we're going to move on to the best list, which is going to be kicked off by Mystical Bad Juju at number 10. Both of the Mystic variants look fantastic with their sharp red, white and black colour contrasts. The figurines are vivid and incredibly well detailed so that both stand out on the shelf for their uniqueness and eye-pleasing nature, but I think the colour palette does suit Bad Juju's design slightly better than it does for Type 1 Crow, especially since you've maintained the detail of her original figurine, but you get to see it in these cool new colours which differ drastically from the original colour palette and make this variant well worth getting. After talking about Mistletoe dive flops for the worst list, it's refreshing to actually talk about a good Christmas variant for a change, and the best Christmas variant to date is still the very first one ever to be made, that being Jolly Bumbleblast. These colours are amazing. They make Bumbleblast truly feel like an embodiment of a Christmas holiday, and the way they sharply contrast is incredibly eye-pleasing. Bumbleblast looks almost like a Christmas tree, and that adds to the cleverness of his design. They nailed it so perfectly the first time round that they've never made a better Christmas chase variant since. For number 8, I have King Cobra Kadabra, who stands out on the shelf for his uniqueness. There is no other colour palette remotely similar to this one, and the white and gold combination, whilst not being sharp and contrasting, is instead quite alluring. The gold automatically elevates the awesomeness of the variant design, but when it's combined with this majestic white, it gives a royal appeal to the character and makes it feel as though what you're currently looking at can't be topped. The basket being black is cherry atop the cake for this incredible variant because that part of the figurine is left to stand out and very sharply contrast the rest of the design, giving you an extreme either end of the brightness scale and making the variant more memorable as a result of the drastically different colour tones. For number 7, I have Quick Draw Rattleshake, another one of the most unique variants which makes him stand out in his own right, but even at night your eyes can't get enough of this incredibly alluring colour palette because for white it's fluorescent paint, and that gives the figurine itself the unique aspect of looking just as great in darkness as it does in the light. The white and blue suits this character design very well, and I just love how it looks. Plus I have a personal connection to this variant as he came for me in the mail for free one day as a result of my membership to the game Skylanders Rewards program. That made this character an extra special treat for me personally, and that's a memory I'll hold fondly onto forever. But no amount of nostalgia can stop Solar Flare Aurora from getting number 6 on the list. Blazing is a word typically associated with speed, and given how fast Aurora's movement is in the game, the fire pattern on her robe makes sense and brings a whole new meaning to the term blazing fast. So this is a variant that has a clever design and it looks appealing too. The fire pattern is unique and extremely detailed, and it's personally appealing to me as it goes alongside my entire brand on YouTube, given that I plaster fire everywhere because the channel name is indeed Ignite the Fire. As such, this variant being high on the list is too perfect an opportunity to pass up. So between the sharp, contrasting colours and excellent attention to detail, Solar Flare Aurora is left to stand out on the shelf for all the right reasons. I can't get over how perfect and awesome she looks with this variant design. Because it's so drastically different to her original, it's worth getting even if you already have the original, just to experience what the better colour scheme is like. With number 5, I have Frightful Fiesta, who does something to elevate the meaning behind Fiesta's design in the first place. This variant expands upon Fiesta's original design and emphasizes the cultural aspects of Fiesta's Mexican inspirations. The orange, for example, is the same colour as the petals used to guide ancestors to their families' ofrendas during Dias de los Muertos. On top of that, the boots, the hat, and the entire outfit look exactly like a mariachi uniform, and the trumpet is an instrument used in very traditional Mexican music. This variant also works as the perfect Halloween variant because of how the orange sharply contrasts the black to look like a pumpkin, contrasting the darkness surrounding it like you'd see during Halloween night. It's admirable how this variant works on so many different levels. But just like Jolly Bumbleblast, an entire line of in-game variants started with just one single figurine. Dark Series 1 Spyro went to become the inspiration for the entire Dark variant series, and I guarantee this series would not exist if not for Dark Spyro looking so incredible in the first place. The black scales contrasting the silver spikes makes this dragon look unique, and it feels like such power at your fingertips. Even in-game, the colour of his attacks are different to match the variant, as he has purple fireballs as opposed to orange fireballs, which makes Dark Spyro stand out even more because of the uniqueness he offers. It's a greater attention to detail than other variants receive, so the developers really did a great job making this variant seem special. Dark Spyro even had an entirely different moveset in 3DS, and it makes you wish that the console counterpart had the same. Dark Spyro went on to inspire an entire line of variants, and it still holds up against all of the other variants from later games. If that's not the making of an awesome variant, then I don't know what is. But kicking off the top 3 and earning that bronze medal is none other than Jade Flashwing, a character who possesses more colours in her character design than you can count. The transition from green to white looks smooth and it's very satisfying to look at. The gold stands out and gives the figurine a very prestigious look, as gold always does. And to top it all off, this variant colour scheme looks perfect for this design, even more so than the original colour scheme, which doesn't have nearly as many nice and contrasting colours to it. But for number 2, we have the single most unique variant in the entirety of the franchise, Royal Double Trouble. This is a very prestigious figure, which is an honour to have in my collection due to its absurd rarity. You can tell the developers poured everything they had into making this as special as they possibly could, especially since the figurine is incredibly unique and the colours are mesmerising. They have such a unique blend which really stands out amongst all the other Skylanders. The specific shade of purple they use makes Double Trouble feel special and rich, much like royalty, so that he can truly live up to his name. They changed every single colour from his original figurine, so when they're side by side, the differences become extremely noticeable, and it makes the variant something worth adding to your collection because it's like having a whole new figurine all over again. Pretty much everything that worked about all the other variants thus far has been exemplified by this one. Its colours are pretty and sharp, and they contrast each other to ensure the figurine stands out. The colour palette itself works when paired with this character design. There is an incredible attention to detail, and it's incredibly different to the original design. But even after all of that, there is one variant which still stands out above all else, and that is none other than Legendary Igniter. That's right, a simple legendary variant of all things is getting the number 1 spot, but this is no regular legendary. It's the favourite version of my favourite character. This right here is what the peak of Skylanders looks like. Every other legendary, of which there are many, pale by comparison to this one. This is a character perfectly designed for the legendary colour palette. The gold itself gives the figurine an elevated and prestigious feeling. It contrasts sharply with the black, and the figurine itself still maintains the detailed embodiments on the armour that the Series 2 Igniter is renowned for. The axe decked out in black paint also feels more natural, and it contrasts the fire surrounding it very nicely to make Igniter look even more intimidating, which is something that I thought was impossible for a design already as perfect as Series 2 Igniter. A part of this placement is bias, but the other part is the fact that even amongst all the other dozens upon dozens of legendary designs, this is the character which adorns the legendary variant in the most glorious manner so that nothing else compares. Even the developers knew this, as the entire fire element never received another legendary variant, as they knew they had already peaked with legendary igniter. And that does it for the best Skylanders variants list. Now, it was much more satisfying for me to finish on that note to talk positively about 10 exceptional Skylanders in-game variants. But that being said, this video is coming to an end, so I will see you tomorrow for yet another video within the 12 days of Skylands. I cannot, in good conscience, end off this video without first thanking all of my incredible channel members whose continued support help make these videos possible. Without them, these videos would be near impossible to make, so from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate every last one of them. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, there are plenty of options on screen now to explore, and please consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. On that note, this video is coming to an end, so thank you so much as always for watching. Until the next video arises, peace!